Good morning. This is Christi and Karla, live and unedited for Emotions in Marriage. So if there's any little blips, you know why.
Right.
So whether you're joining us this morning as a follow-up to Bill Lovelace's marriage conference, curious but maybe a little intimidated by counseling, or you're just scrolling by this morning, we're really glad you're here. I'm Christi Shuhart. I'm one of the counselors here at Operation 220.
And I'm Karla Pitts. I'm the Director of Counseling at Operation 220. And we're so happy that you're joining us here today. And we're looking forward to talking to you a little bit about how it is that we work with couples. And Christi and I were talking yesterday, and I was remembering, how is it that we got started in reaching out to couples, and why did we choose to go down the path that we're talking to you about today? It's because we were getting a lot of calls from ministries and pastors wanting to send couples to us, and we found that we had typically in our history, we had mostly been working with individuals, and couples require a little bit of a different approach, but we were a bit lost. The sad reality is that marriages in Christian homes are in trouble. There's no difference statistically, between the divorce rate in the secular world or in the Christian world, and that's really sad. As we know, divorce affects not only the couple, it affects their children, it affects future grandchildren, the grandparents. There's just such a big ripple effect. It affects the church family. And so we have a problem here, and we wanted to be available to people and to try to help move them into a better place. We really didn't know how to do that effectively. We were finding that couples who came to us were believers, mostly, who knew the message of who they were in Christ. They were just baffled and in so much pain over why they were not connecting and struggling. It's very, very common, and we wanted to be able to help these couples. And so the way this unfolded is that our friend and colleague on staff here, Melody Alexander, knew about emotionally focused therapy as a way to help couples. And so we jumped on that and received some training. And now, over the last several years, we've been able to help couples in a very special and effective way come to a better place and strengthen their bond.
It's incredible, yeah. And my husband and I are a testament to the work that you guys have done, and have been deeply impacted by emotionally focused therapy. So let's dive in.
That's right. That's good. So I want to tell you a story of a couple who came to us. So Jim and Mary were a couple who'd been married for a number of years, and Jim worked really long hours, and he found himself often coming home late. Now, this was hard on Mary, of course, because she's at home with their young children, and when he walks in the door and he's late, she is exhausted and overwhelmed, and did find herself complaining and blaming him for the struggle that she was having. This is a really common situation.
As a mother of two young little ones, I can testify.
Right, and I remember similar things happening to us. And so, but poor Jim, he is working hard to provide for his family, and he can't understand why it is that Mary doesn't get that and cut him some slack. But she's at home and she is feeling abandoned, neglected, as though he doesn't care. He's just doesn't even know what to do at that point, how to make her happy. And so he retreats. He watches TV or goes off to his computer or plays a game. He's just trying to get out of the line of fire. But what happens is that now Mary is feeling even more abandoned than before. And so you can see, here is a cycle that moves really fast, and before they know it, Jim and Mary are hurting, separated, not a team anymore. And this is a very seems like a kind of a small thing, but it's these repeated disconnections that can land a couple in some pretty serious trouble on down the road.
And so much can happen there too, because then, you know, the children can recognize that there's a disconnect between the parents, try to pit them against each other to get whatever they want. The couple, you know, can just kind of be in survival mode at some point, especially if there's a big thing that happens between them, because they're already
drifting apart, and that's hard. That's really painful. And what we find is not only is it painful, it's really confusing, because if you are especially a, you know, well-meaning, good-hearted Christian couple, you feel like you know the things that you need to do to have good communication and to connect, and yet you find yourself really upset with your partner, really upset with the person who is most important to you, and you can't figure out how to fix it. A lot of times people really try, and those are the ones who come to us, and they're so distressed.
I mean, it's completely disorienting. That sounds so similar to our story, where we had been told as an engaged couple, newlyweds, on and on, that we had really good communication. And so even though we were still communicating, it's like there was still just this block up, and we couldn't figure out what it was, but we knew there was more, and we longed for more.
Right. Yes. I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking, yes, this is a story that we hear a lot. It's a story that we've experienced. And it's so disheartening when you are in that place and you know it's supposed to be so much better. This is not what you signed up for. You didn't imagine. You know, you had so much affirmation, Christi. You and your new husband, and then you find yourself in the throes of real life, and you're hitting blocks, and it is disorienting. That's such a great word, because you're looking for security and safety, and when you don't have that, it's very upsetting.
Yeah. Would you say this applies to every couple?
I would say most.
Okay.
Most. Yes. Of course, there's a broad spectrum. When we talked about this yesterday, there's a broad spectrum of couples who are, you know, truly terribly escalated and have a lot of very hard things happening in their relationship. And then there are those on the other end of the spectrum who are just feel like this could be better.
Kind of in roommate mode.
Yes.
And that's where we were headed. We were headed into roommate mode, and we didn't want that.
Well, and you know that it's very dangerous. It's a vulnerable place to be in roommate mode. So it's good to nip that in the bud like you did. So here we are now. So we have a couple. We have Jim and Mary. So what do we do for them? And seeing that this is so common for believers, so what do we do? What do we do next? And I want to talk to you about what we have discovered is the problem. So what we've been talking about is that negative cycle. Right? So our attention as a couple who's if you're a part of a couple and you are unhappy with your partner, the natural, normal thing is to notice the things that are said and those movements, that glance, that body language, where we are very focused on tone of voice, what's being said, how you're looking at me, are you turned away from me, are you showing up late, are you not following through for me. All of these actions and choices grab our attention, and they can become, and do become, our focus naturally. But what we may not realize is that underneath all those words and all of those movements in this dance of marriage are being driven by the emotions that are sitting underneath.
Right.
So that's what we wanted to explore today. What role does that play, and so what do we do about that?
Sounds good.
Yeah. So I think for most of us, believers don't realize that the emotions are happening and that they are driving this. We say it's, you know, it's the engine that drives this cycle. So our attention can be at the top with the things that people do, the things our partner says, And underneath it all, we are experiencing emotions that are very difficult to talk about. First of all, we're not trained to speak in vulnerable language and to take a risk and to be able to say, for Mary to be able to say, Jim, when you come home late, what I feel is that I don't matter to you. Mm-hmm. I feel alone and I feel scared, and what comes across is you are dropping the ball, you broke your promise, you're not being responsible. These are often the way that hurt gets communicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't care about me, you don't care about the kids,
right,
etc.
Right. So these emotions are underground, mm-hmm. and not only are they hard to talk about, but a lot of times they're not known. Mm-hmm. The feelings that we have are very complicated, mm-hmm. and for now, some people, or some of us, we are able to access our emotions pretty easily, and they're right here, mm-hmm. and we can put words to them. Mm-hmm. But for others, it's really normal for those feelings that are driving their decisions, maybe driving their retreat and their avoidance, mm-hmm. of a difficult situation. Those emotions, they're there, mm-hmm. but they are maybe more difficult to access.
Well, and I think what's confusing too, especially, in New Covenant theology, learning about who you are in Jesus, depending on Jesus, there can be this subtle teaching, or even, blatant teaching that emotions are bad. Mm-hmm. Do not live by your emotions. Emotions are not truth. We want to walk in truth. We want to walk hand in hand with Jesus. We don't walk in our emotions. So that can lead to suppressing. That could lead to, the other pendulum of wanting to experience good emotions and closeness with mm-hmm. Jesus. And so that's another thing that's disorienting. It's I'm not going to live by my emotions, but they're still there.
Right.
They're still in my stomach. I still feel it. They're in my chest. They're in my shoulders and my neck when I'm stressed. And so how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because that is the training that a lot of us as believers have received. We know that we need to hang on to truth. We know that Scripture is so important, that it is critical that we understand our true identity, that we are able to cling to and be guided by the truth of who we are in Christ, and we really want to live out of that, and we do mm-hmm. often, but it's an incomplete picture if we forget that the emotional piece is part of God's creation mm-hmm. of a human being. Mm-hmm. And what you're saying reminds me of, that saying that emotions never go away. Our feelings never go away. Mm-hmm. If they're ignored, they don't die. Mm-hmm. They just sit there mm-hmm. and wait for us.
And fester, even. Come out in sideways ways.
That's right. We get caught by surprise mm-hmm. ourselves when things just erupt, mm-hmm. and we certainly catch our partner by surprise, oh my goodness, where'd that come from? What's that about? Mm-hmm. So we see as emotions being really valuable. And so how do we do that? One of the pictures that I have that we talked about was that emotions, our feelings are like the check engine light that comes on in the car. Mm. So we get into a car and we start it and we get ready to go, and the check engine light comes on and it's red and it's blinking, and so it's a warning. There's a problem here. There's something that we need to pay attention to. Mm-hmm. So in the same way, when our emotions are surfacing, we want to respect that. Our own emotions, our partner's emotions, mm-hmm. this person that we dearly love, mm-hmm. who's so important to us. Mm-hmm. We may not be sure that we like them in that moment as these emotions are surfacing, but we say, okay, something's happening here that's important. What is it? And it can be a lot. Mm-hmm. And that's where we come in, where sometimes we need help. We need a little help navigating the emotional world mm-hmm. and what to do with all of this.
Mm-hmm. Emotions are indicators.
Right.
that something's up. It could be joy, it could be pain.
Right.
And yeah, you're right. Sometimes we just need a little guidance.
Right.
Not a push into them.
Right.
That's not what you're going to
guidance.
get when you come here, but just, a little handhold. Let's walk through this together.
Right. It's our work with couples. We'll talk a little bit more exactly what it looks like in a minute. Is very collaborative. Mm-hmm. It's very much the couple and the counselor working together to navigate what's happening. So I think now what I want to do, Christi, is talk a little bit about what is our starting point. We've talked about the problem. So the problem is that we have a negative cycle. Mm-hmm. Our attention is mostly grabbed by the things that are said and the things that we do. You walk out of the room, I go after you, you close the door, you say that's enough, I say wait a minute, we need to work this out, we need to talk about it. So our focus is easily, of course, goes to all of those things, those movements that we have. But we've discovered that the negative cycle is driven by these unspoken, unacknowledged emotions that are really driving it. So we see the problem. Well, what do we do then? So because we are Christians and we are wanting to come at this from a biblical worldview and to help people with God in mind, so we say God is our primary connecting relationship. He is the ultimate source of connection and care. The Bible is not a marriage manual. Right. But
we'd like for it to be.
Yeah, sometimes. But it's a beautiful love story. Not a marriage manual, but a beautiful love story. And our deepest instinct as humans is to have a connection with God and with a few precious people in our life. We are hardwired for that.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to pause here for a second because, in our culture especially, we are trained to think of ourselves as independent and self-sufficient. Yep. And as you mentioned earlier, as needy people, that God created us with specific needs for love, acceptance, security. What we might have heard or thought we heard was God is the one to meet your needs. And that's true. It's true that God has in mind that He would be the one who's going to be the ultimate meter of our deep human needs that He created in us. But He also has planned that our partners, other key people that He has put in our lives, are going to be conduits of meeting those needs too. So we play a vital role in each other's lives.
But how is that not codependency?
Okay.
Because we love that word in Christianity. You don't want to be codependent. You don't want to be too dependent.
All right, watch out. So that's confusing. That's such a good point. So we like to say God created us to be interdependent.
Oh, yeah.
So that we all do better, we thrive when we have close connection to meaningful people.
That's so different. That's a different viewpoint. It changes everything.
It does. It makes it okay to rely on a person.
I'm not codependent. I'm interdependent.
Interdependent. You are designed, He is designed to rely on you. You're designed to rely on Him. And we do better in life when we can do that. But you can see that if you're caught up in a negative cycle, how very hard it is to rely and to trust when there's no safety. So we've got distance. You're not able to rely. You desperately need to. You're longing to, but that distress is due to the fact that that person is so important to you, and yet you feel this distance. It's very hard, very painful. So we know that partners long, whether you realize it or not, they long for a loving, secure connection with each other. And Mary, when Jim comes home late and she's so upset and she's coming, she's complaining and she's blaming, But what's underneath all that is this, she's reaching for him and she's saying, without saying it, are you here for me? Are you going to respond to me?
Am I safe?
Right.
Do you love me?
Right.
Do you love me anymore?
Do I matter to you?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's not knowing that any of that is under there. All he's hearing is, you are failing me. You're not coming through for me. You're in the doghouse. So he doesn't know about her desperate longing for him.
He just hears the nag.
Right, here's the nag. Quit nagging me. And she doesn't know that he's feeling at a loss and just thinking, what did I do wrong now? How can I fix this? I don't even know how to fix it. In fact, it looks too dangerous over there to go towards her to try to straighten this out. So I think I need to check out for a while.
Yeah, when Ryan and I were in the throes of counseling with Melody and learning about our negative cycle, or as I call it, the cycle of insanity, she said, oftentimes, if you can pause and just picture a little Ryan, a young Ryan, like a child Ryan, and a child Christi reaching out and trying to connect, but not knowing how, it can kind of just ease the tension. It makes me want to weep thinking about it. It just softens everything, because that's really what's happening.
Yes, that framing that Melody was helping you to move into is all about wanting to be attached to a person, and that framing changes everything. It changes completely the way that we look at relationships.
Sorry if I jumped ahead.
No, this is great. We need to. I'm looking at our time too.
Live and unedited, folks.
Yes, you're getting us raw. So the relationship between God and people of faith is an attachment bond. And in this relationship with God, we find him to be our safe haven, a secure base, and the ultimate source of security. In that same way, you and Ryan and Larry and I and our couple that we're talking about here are longing, are needing to strengthen their attachment so that they can have safety at home with each other, and then kind of refuel when they come home and restore, and then out of their safety and security, then they can go out and take on the world.
Yeah.
And so it's super distressing and problematic if the world, which is just inherently unsafe, but if you're coming home to more chaos and distress, you can see how that does not work very well.
You're always living at a 10.
Yes.
Nothing is safe. No one is safe.
So God's plan is a good one, but how do we get, how can we bring that into the couple's relationship and into the counseling office? So maybe this is a good time to, we're going to play a video. Let me set this up for you. Scott and Sally are a dear couple that I had the privilege of being with for about the last year and a half. And we asked them to put a video together for us, just tell us their story and give us a bit of their testimony of what it's been like to come to us for counseling at Operation 220. So I thank you, Scott and Sally, for doing this, and we're going to share them with you. So.
So I'm Scott Small, and this is my wife, Sally Small, and we have been in counseling with Karla Pitts for a year and a half or so, and this is our story.
So for over 20 years ago, I learned about who I was in Christ through a local ministry here, and just because of where I was in my walk, I didn't really truly walk that out in my life at that time.
You know, I've been a Christian. I accepted Christ when I was 12, but it's been quite the road, and it has evolved at a very brisk pace in the last 3 or 4 years of learning how to actually live our faith out.
I had a lot of unresolved pain from my childhood that I hadn't really figured out and understood, like how God was using that in my life. So I was trying to achieve closeness and safety with my husband, and we just were like two ships passing in the night and not really connecting fully emotionally for it to be a healthy marriage.
I was faking myself out for quite a long time, because I thought I was a Christian, and I thought I was living my faith out, but I wasn't. I wasn't being honest with myself, with my own past. I didn't think I had trauma or any of those things in my past that were affecting me. But as we went through talking with Karla, just amazing things started coming out in combination with me seeking the Lord first, just getting to know God, and then learning some tools from Karla of how to relate and be there for my wife and love her as Christ loved the church. Things really began to change in a big way that I could start creating safety in our relationship so that it could be more nurturing. And to be honest, it was a surprising thing that I didn't know how to do that. I thought I knew how to do that, and I didn't, because before all this, and looking back, and I don't like to say this, but I was selfish. I was worried about Scott and what I was doing, and it changed drastically over these last few years. And it's exciting.
So, you know, we can't watch that video without being moved by Scott and Sally's story. And as they were so open and vulnerable with us and telling us about themselves, and you can see how even though they had been believers for a long time and understood who they were in Christ and were living out of their true identity, but their connection with each other was fragile. That this disconnect was painful for them. You know, they each referenced that they had childhood pain and trauma that was showing up in their marriage, which they didn't realize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, they didn't realize that the way that they learned to connect or be close or not be close because of safety concerns or just emotional safety was showing up in their marriage and making it difficult for them to be the people that they wanted to be for each other. Mm-hmm. So we're going to see a little bit more of their story in a few minutes, but I am taken by how surprised they were by the things that they were discovering, you know, that they didn't realize. And you know, Scott even talks about, you know, I'm realizing now that I was selfish, you know, and he didn't know. He didn't know he was doing, his role of a husband. He took it seriously, but there were things that were happening that were not great and were causing pain for Sally, causing pain for him, and you know, it was a really hard place for both of them.
Yeah, and you know, trauma I think is kind of a buzzword right now after being in a pandemic for the past year plus, and when you start realizing you have trauma, it can feel very shameful.
That's true.
What's wrong with me? You know, why am I like this? And, you know, that easily bleeds over into all relationships. You know, why do I panic when they don't text me back? Why do I feel so hurt when they look at me this way? And, you know, it's like in a millisecond, it can send you back to a childhood memory.
That's really true.
And it's so confusing. But
we think we should be better than that. We should be,
Yeah.
you know, maybe we think we should not be affected.
I should be stronger.
Right.
I
We
should depend on Jesus more.
Right. Right.
I'm living by my emotions. I shouldn't be affected by that eye contact.
I should be patient.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I'm not walking in the
Yeah.
Spirit.
Right. I'm doing this wrong.
But the reality is, because we're emotional beings and emotions create vibrancy in life, you know, and they're indicators, like we talked about the check engine light. So it's like, well, why did that glance at the coffee shop send me into a tailspin? What
Yeah.
is it? What's going on here?
Yes. It's good. It's confusing.
Yeah. So
Yes.
since safety and trust lead to vulnerability and lasting change, how do we make that happen?
Okay.
How do we repair?
Right. And this is the thing that I love to talk about. And when Christi and I were visiting ahead of time, we were just, you know, we were off and running because this is something that we care about deeply because, you know, in our own marriages and our own relationships. And so how do we help couples? So we mentioned earlier that we've adopted and we've been trained in a way of working with couples, a model that's called emotionally focused therapy. And what we love about it is that it gets to the emotional underpinnings that we've been talking about today. So because maybe we haven't valued emotions and we've been trained to think biblically and to hang on to truth, which we said earlier, yes, we do need that, that's important. But the emotions are like that check engine light that say something's going on here, something important is happening that we need to pay attention to. In this way of working too, we see that the hurting couples, when they come in, that the negative cycle is what is the problem. And neither partner is the problem. You know, he's not the problem, she's not the problem. There is no hot seat in there. It's a very, we strive to make it a very safe, accepting environment, and we avoid labels, we avoid pathologies. There's
You're the bad one, you're the good one, you're
Right.
you're the innocent one, you're the abuser.
right. We avoid all of that because what we see as the problem is that there is a negative cycle that they have unwittingly created, and it is running the show, but they don't understand it. And so what we so I think now what I want to do is talk a little bit about what it looks like, maybe what it looks like in the counseling office, and then talk, if we have time, talk a little bit about the history of emotionally focused therapy.
Okay.
If we run out of time for that, there we can point you to some resources if you're curious. But because this is very collaborative, that when the couple comes in, it's not them on their own trying to figure it out. You know, it's we as the counselor with them, very collaborative, joining in with them. And our job, our goal at the beginning is to become students of that negative cycle.
Okay.
Because like we keep saying, these emotions are underground a lot of the time, and we don't know how to access them. We don't know how to express them.
So how do you prevent shame in that and learning the negative cycle? Because I can feel negative.
Oh yeah.
Emotions are bad, like trauma, you know, walking through wounds. How do you avoid shame? How do you talk through that?
Well, that's where our role comes in expressing a relentless empathy.
Okay.
Because if we think of the cycle as a dance, and the emotions carry the music. So when the emotions are sending these signals that are the music of the dance, what we want to do is to understand and discover what are the underlying emotions behind the movements between the couple
Okay.
in their cycle. So when Jim walks in late, what is it like for you as his wife, as the mother? What happens for you right then? What happens? What's going on inside of you? We're really curious. We stay really curious, and because we don't know, we might be tempted to come to some conclusions about why we think something's happening, but the fact is we do not know. They don't know either. And so we want to just look at this cycle, slow it down, and say, what was happening for you when he walked in late? Oh, you were feeling, you were really upset. Okay, so you were upset. I want to really understand that, being upset. And so then we look in our being curious, we want to hear about, okay, what was going on for you? You were upset. Tell me more about that. I want to understand it. And so, of course, he's hearing all that too. And we start to discover what's happening underneath the surface. And so when you were upset, then what did you do? Well, she says, I let him have it. I was just telling him how angry I was, how disappointed I was. Oh, okay, Jim, when she said that, okay, what happened for you when you heard that? So then we're inviting and we're slowing things down, and we're looking to discover what's going on underneath the surface. So our goal is to create a judgment-free zone. We are humans. We are responding to each other, and we just want to change the way that we respond, which happens when we better understand what's going on inside of us, can communicate that, and share that with our partner. Our partner gets to hear it. They get to respond back to us, and all of that happens in the context of safety, which
it's so delicate.
Yes.
So if Jim responds back with his emotions, then how do you kind of fix their situation?
Right, that's a good question. So when they begin to discover that they are what they are feeling and are able to make more sense of what's happening in their emotional world, we help them put words to it.
Okay.
It sounds like you're feeling when he walks in the door and he's late, it sounds like, that sounds really sad, the way that you're describing that, it makes sense that you're so tired, you're so longing for him to get home, you're missing him, you're reaching for him, and you're saying, where did you go? Where did you go?
You feel rejected.
Yes. And so can you share that with him? So we help Mary begin to put words to the things that she's feeling, and then in the office, she turns to Jim and says, we try to make it really small. She'll say what she was feeling, very much what we've discovered together, and then when she turns to him and can look him in the eye and say, well, when you were coming in late, what was really happening for me was that I was wondering if you cared, and I was feeling so alone, and I just didn't know what to do with that. It matters so much to me. You matter so much to me. You're so important. I just need you to be here. Jim has probably never heard anything like that before, so he hears that, and he goes, oh my goodness, this is, okay, I didn't know that this was happening. So we begin to have these kinds of, help them to have these vulnerable interactions. And this is when, as the emotions surface, there's a different music that starts to occur, and then the dance between them starts to change.
It's like healing eye contact. You know, even just looking at you, I almost was right to tears thinking of these moments of connection that Ryan and I had in Melody's office, of just looking at each other and expressing, you know, childhood wounds that were triggered. And it wasn't, you know, necessarily his fault. It wasn't necessarily my fault. It was just these kind of inadequate ways of trying to connect. And I think that's so important for our viewers to know is that, you know, this isn't always fleshy behavior. This isn't always a sin issue. You know, it can definitely be, but oftentimes, like, it's just so nuanced. You know, he tells me that we need to watch our budget for the next month, and I hear something different, that you screwed up, you spent too much money, our financial situation is your fault, da 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 da, and then I shut down. And then he's left wondering, all I said is we need to watch our spending for the next month.
What just
but it
happened?
happens so quickly. It happens in a millisecond, and it stirs so much up in our souls.
Yes, that's such a great example. It seems like a small thing, you know, in the scheme of things, but it's not. It's not. What you're describing is that innocent comment by Ryan touched on a raw spot inside of you that you probably, you know, you may not have even known that was there in that moment. You just know you didn't like it. It felt like a criticism. It felt like I'm dropping the ball here in some way. And so that it interrupts that closeness that we want to have. Of course it does. Because if you're feeling, you know, having feelings like that, it's hard to be close. It's hard to feel safe. And so it's a series of those kinds of incidents that can take us further down the road to more and more disconnect. They're just
more explosive disconnect,
possibly
yelling, you know, someone leaves for a few nights, someone seeks attention elsewhere.
More hopelessness, more this is not what I signed up for. I thought marriage was going to be different than this. You're not meeting my needs. I'm failing you. It's just, you know, it runs the gamut. I think people who are listening to us know what we're talking about, and maybe, you know, have experienced similar things. It's very common. It's very normal.
But it doesn't have to be.
It can be so much better.
Right. There's hope.
These struggles are normal, but they're, like you say, there is a better way, and we sense that there's got to be more than this, and there is. So that's where we come in, and we help, you know, help couples with that. I want to look here and see if there's anything else I want to mention before. Okay, so I think I said that we help the couples explore and bring understanding to their negative cycle, bring understanding to their unexpressed emotions, that we help them learn to take risks by reaching and responding, by practicing in our office. And then as they learn to do more of that in our office, then when they leave, and as they've discovered more about how their negative cycle operates, then when they're at home, outside of the office, when it pops up, they can hit the pause. They can go, oh wait, here we go. We're moving into our cycle, and they can hit the pause button and say, okay, let's try this again. I know more about where you're coming from now. I understand you. Let's try a different way. So it's really baby steps. It's slow but real progress and change.
And it can take time too, because we started counseling with Melody a few years ago, and she kind of has an open door policy, so we'll pop back in from time to time. We popped back in this spring, and we had an incident, like a month ago, where all weekend long we were just in our negative cycle, and we just couldn't get out of it. And we were both frustrated and flustered, and having little ones to interrupt doesn't really help anything, because you can't really talk it out. And then eventually, like after 36, 48 hours, we were finally able to reconnect. And it just took us sitting on the couch, uninterrupted, and looking each other in the eyes. And we were really able to express what we were feeling. So it's like, you know, we're not masters of this. And even if you come to counseling in our office, like, it takes time. Like, we're all a healing in progress. This is
Right.
a lifelong journey. It's
Right.
not like you walk out the door and you're back in the honeymoon phase necessarily.
But it's better,
Yeah.
and it's just surprising how these little movements. We always say the slightest movement is a cause of celebration.
Right.
And so what you and Ryan were able to do is, okay, that is because you did all that hard work before.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it took you to that place.
Yeah, so what took us 48 hours that one time, you know, it didn't take us 6 months or a year or 5 years to recover.
Right.
It took us 2 days.
Right. Because you had underlying safety and security and had learned how to trust that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so good. That's so good to hear. Okay, I think this would be a good time for us to rejoin Scott and Sally and to hear the rest of their story.
So I guess what was surprising for me was that meeting with Karla virtually did not inhibit us to grow as much as we could grow individually and as a couple. And yet we also both came from a place where we wanted to grow together. And I think that because we came from that mindset, that it was successful. Karla was very good and is very good at getting to know us personally and our histories, and being able to speak from a genuine place while we were counseling with her, and I appreciated that so much.
Quite frankly, I was, probably a little skeptical about the online counseling, on Zoom, because there's just so much that you don't pick up, the energy of being there with somebody. But it actually ended up, I think, being a safer place to become more vulnerable somehow, some way. And Karla, again, she's an incredible listener, and she really has the Holy Spirit, I think, leading and guiding her in that, because she would just hear things that were not said and ask questions that were gently piercing, that brought us along in a way that was just amazing to me. It was just an amazing. So
I really truly believe in the last 3 or 4 years that our marriage has been transformed. We've been married 30 years, and I feel like in the last 3 or 4 years we've been living the way we were God and us to be living. The amount of security and safety that I feel in the relationship now is 100% amazingly comforting to know that I can lean on Scott and I can rely on him in ways that I was never able to do before.
what's happened in the last 3 years has been quite amazing to me. And every time I try to explain this or talk about it, it's like, has this really happened for us? But once I started seeking the Lord first, with all my heart and with all my mind and with all my soul, things started changing in combination with Karla helping us talk through and understand how not just to have our identity in Christ, but live our identity in Christ. It's very different, but living it out through my heart is a very different thing than just knowing what it is. And that allowed me to see her with Christ's eyes. It allowed me to hear with Christ's ears and to really listen to her heart. It's like I have a whole new wife. We have a whole new relationship that didn't exist, and it's very exciting for where the Lord's going to take this. And it's I just encourage everybody to, whether you think you have a great marriage or not, I think with learning what we have learned using with Karla has really transformed our marriage and where we're going. So exciting times ahead.
So, Scott and Sally, thank you so much for sharing your heart with us. I just appreciate you both so much. And you made it so clear, your vulnerability just comes through loud and clear. And I want to remark on how you mentioned that it being in a virtual setting, because you're in another state, and we met on Zoom, but we found it to be really effective. You found it to still be very effective and helpful. And honestly, I have to say that I love, meeting in person. That's always, if we can, that's always the very best way. But doing virtual and Zoom meetings has been great. It has been just as Scott and Sally described. It has worked really, really well. So I don't have any hesitation about that at all anymore.
And I can echo that too, because that's what Ryan and I did with Melody this spring. And yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of a difference, but the fruit that comes from it, that you glean of connecting and that attachment, it's worth it.
Yes.
It's worth the risk.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. And Scott and Sally, it's very evident they stepped into the room willing, ready to do the work. That's not to say that they didn't have some some normal apprehensions and sensitivities about, okay, where are we going with this, and hesitations. That's really normal. But their willingness to just, okay, let's go for it, has paid off so immensely as they described in their closeness.
Yeah.
And they talked about the safety that they feel now, the security that they have with each other, and how Sally loves being able to depend on and rely on Scott in a way that she said she wasn't able to before. And there is a moment in the video that you all didn't get to see because they provided us with a lot of footage and a lot of material to work with. We couldn't include it all, but there is a segment that I wish that we could have gotten in there, and it just wasn't possible. But it was when Scott was talking about how when he looks back on the way he used to be with Sally, and how he's so affected by what he sees, his realization. He says, I just didn't get it. I was selfish. I didn't know it. And in this piece, he's just overcome by emotion and can't even really speak. And Sally reaches over, and she just reaches over and puts her hand on his leg. And I thought, yes, that is what shows their that change that they have experienced in their relationship, and their closeness is real, their security is real. Things are not perfect, and they do not need to be, and their negative cycle probably will crop up again, just the way it does for all of us.
Right, yeah.
But they have a path now to go down. They know where to go. So it's very, very different.
I can definitely relate to their story, and I can look back at photos of us as newlyweds, standing there smiling, but knowing, I wouldn't say it was a facade, but there was pain there. And now I can look at photos of us and say, we're not perfect, but it's not a show.
Yeah.
It's authentic. We're connected. And I think it shows. I think it, even if you just saw us in passing, or at, granted we haven't been to a lot of events lately, but if you were to see us in public or see us among family, I think it shows that we are connected. And we know how to repair if there is a disconnect. Our communication is better. It was good then, but now it's phenomenal in my opinion because of the work that you guys have done here.
And you remind me of an important point, that the goal is not a conflict-free relationship.
Yeah, we're not perfect.
It's the ability to have a repair after conflict.
There's freedom to be human.
Yes, right.
And still be loved because we are human. That's how he designed us.
Yes, and because your trust, your security with Ryan has gotten to the place where you have the ability to show up and to express your emotions, and he understands you better than he ever did before, and you understand him.
I can be myself, he can be himself. We can express our needs in ways that we couldn't before, instead of just resentment building, you know? So I know some of our viewers are probably wondering, is this EFT thing, is this work biblical?
Yeah.
Because in Christian culture, a lot of theology teaches, you know, to be hesitant about anything that's related to psychology.
Right.
So, you know, how is the Spirit involved in this? How is Scripture involved in this? Is this all about a cycle? You know?
Right.
Or where's the biblical counseling portion to this?
Okay, that is such a good question. And I remember when I was talking earlier how we are in the counseling office, we are creating a safe zone where part of what happens is that we do not label, we do not pathologize, we do not try to diagnose or categorize or look at a person's behavior and identify them according to that. So we are always setting that aside. So that gives us the freedom to truly get to know the person and where they're coming from. And remember when I said that the Bible, though it's not a marriage manual, it is a love story. And something that I came across the other day is that the current research on adult love lines up with the biblical bookends of marriage that are in Genesis 2 and Revelation 22. We see marriage at the beginning and we see marriage at the end. And emotionally focused therapy lines up beautifully with that. And so we are able to incorporate what is God's good plan for couples, what is God's good plan for the world, for his people. And we have found that there are no contradictions, and it's a beautiful blend. In fact, I'll mention, Christi, I'll just go ahead and mention this book now. There is an excellent book. We're going to provide a link to you in our drop-down menu in a minute, called Created for Connection, and it is the biblical approach to emotionally focused therapy. And we highly recommend this, and in fact ask couples that come to us to get this and to read it, and we use this. So does that answer your question, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. And you know, as counselors here at Operation 220, we go into the counseling sessions praying.
Yes.
And I like to actually bookend my appointments with prayer.
Right.
Pray over the session, ask for new healing, new revelation, and then, you know, once we've uncovered or covered or whatever we've done, you know, pray at the end. And so, you know, we kind of talk about like guiding through emotions, guiding through, you know, whatever you're trying to heal from, really, and then knowing that also the Spirit is guiding.
That's right.
You know, we're holding each other's hand, but we're holding the Spirit's hand.
That's right.
Jesus is covering the process.
And we're asking him and expecting him to, we're looking for a path. You know, there's trouble. You know, there's trouble here with this couple, and they're hurting. And so we are asking God to show us the path out of this. And we know there's a path. And so our job is to find it. And that's what we've been talking about. So let me talk a little bit about what the impact has been.
Yeah, please. What does this look like at Operation 220? What results have we seen? How are families and lives being impacted?
Right, so I love to talk about this too. So when we were first learning how to do this, what it felt like to me, and I was talking about this at the beginning, I would say when couples would come in and I was beginning to work with them, I felt like I was in the operating room, and that the patient was stretched out on the table and they were open, and I was holding the medical manual in my hand, and I was going, okay, what do we do now? And it has been so exciting to grow and to be with couples and to see the changes that take place. I think of it too as when couples come to us and they're so highly distressed, sometimes they're even escalated, and there's just a lot of negative emotion and a lot of hurt and a lot of pain. And it's as though they are showing up at the hospital with a, they're having a heart attack. And so they're in the emergency room, and maybe our tendency before would have been, okay, they're in the emergency room, they're having a heart attack, and because our focus would be on, okay, here's what living out of your true identity as a believer looks like, and we would seek to help people access that and to understand that and to live out of that truth. And so the conflict that we were running into, the problem, the block that we were experiencing, was that couples who are really upset and distressed and in a lot of pain cannot really hear that. They're not able, understanding their identity is good, and they probably already do, the ones who come to us, but it's not helping.
No, it's like someone being at a 10, you say, calm down.
Right.
They're gonna stay up here.
It's like
not gonna work.
No, it's like being in the emergency room and saying, okay, you're having a heart attack, and so I see here that you don't eat very healthy, and it doesn't look like you walked around the block lately. And it would be like bringing in a nutrition coach or a lifestyle coach while they're having a heart attack and saying, so here are some things that would be good for you to implement. Well, that is not going to help them. We got to save their life.
The rationalized thinking isn't going to help in that moment.
No, those things are important.
Yes.
Just like identity is important, biblical truth is critical, it's important, but what they are needing right then is someone to come alongside them and say, okay, we're gonna run a test here, and we're gonna do whatever we need to do to get you to a better place. And so that's what we have discovered. We've discovered that these distressed couples who are struggling to receive and to live out of their true identity, as their connections improve and their security increases, their trust is rebuilt, they are able to access all of what God has for them in their individually and as a married couple. They are so much better able to get to that place. That they are, we find that this working with the emotions through this model of counseling enhances what we already do. It does not take away from it at all. It's been an incredible asset to us to have that training and the ability to do this. We have a special bond with God, and the love connection that we have with God is one that is free of fear and able to be relaxed, like you said, and be ourselves. And this is the same thing we want to happen in a marriage context. Each party is able to be who they really are, experience acceptance and love and enjoyment of each other. And so we are finding that is happening.
Rest in that security.
Right. So it's overall been really positive, and whenever a couple comes to us, we are just so pleased and so excited to be able to see where we can go and how we can help them.
Yeah. Man, this has been good. Should we start a podcast live and then edit it?
I think so.
So, if today...
We have a lot more we could say.
Yeah. We could go for another hour, but we're going to cut ourselves off. So if today stirred something in you, if you know your identity in Jesus and you believe you are living life as God intended. You're dependent on Him, but there's still this lack in your relationships. You're not interdependent, as we've talked about. You're still kind of living independently in your relationships. And, I think about Scripture and how we teach here that He's given us abundant life in Jesus, but that also means abundant life in relationships, abundant life in the marriage relationship. So if you feel like you're lacking that, we would love to connect with you. If you look on either Facebook or YouTube, there are links underneath the video, and you can click and go directly to the Heal tab on our website. That's where you can find more information about counseling. You can also fill out the counseling form if you feel like you're ready, and that will go directly to our admin, right? And then she sends it your way, our director of counseling, and then you'll be prayerfully placed, and someone will be in touch with you.
That's right.
And then also, there's another link underneath there for this wonderful book that we mentioned, Create for Connection. Dr. Sue Johnson wrote it, and in partnership with Kenneth Sandifer. Probably should have practiced that name before I said it. But she championed this research, and she has tons of resources on YouTube as well. You could just type in Dr. Sue Johnson and find out more about attachment theory. You can find out more about emotionally focused therapy, and learn just more about what we've talked about today. When you click on the link to buy Create for Connection, if you use the link through Amazon, you can also use Amazon Smile and put Operation 220 Ministries in, and so we'll get a little bit of a teensy portion of whatever the book cost is, whether it's Kindle, paperback, hardback, whatever. So it adds up,
Yes, it all does. There's so much more we could say. I thought we might have time to talk a little bit about, more about what is attachment theory and how did that get started. There is, all of that is explained in this book, and there are lots of resources if you're curious and reading about it and how it was a departure from the customary way of helping people with their problems, and how Sue Johnson is truly a pioneer, started working with couples in the 1980s, and there is a full body of research and clinical studies, and so we feel so confident and have the ability to rest on that and just operate out of this beautiful blend of biblical truth and practical experience that some very smart humans have spent time in developing that we're able to access now.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and maybe we'll do another one of these in the future.
Maybe.
We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.